I suspect in a few years' time, we'll be standing somewhere in a bar somewhere, and they'll say, do you remember that speech that George gave on the 3rd of September 2019? And weren't the days of the cherry industry so fantastic in those days, and how have things changed? Because it seems to me that that we're living in a moment of, if you ignore the whole trade policy issues, which we'll come on to in a second, I thought almost the most important word that you had on the screen there was that big word sustainable. And is this sustainable? Is this kind of attempt to put as much product as you can, stuff it into this little bottle, shall we say? In that month, we put 50%, you said, of all the total cherry sales that you make in China within 1 month. That any kind of economist, any analyst would say, you guys are crazy, you can't do this, it's not sustainable. And what I'd like to do in the next kind of half hour is not necessarily look back on what's happened, but kind of chart forward about where we might go, because again, you said the next 10 years are going to be quite different to the last 10 years. And that's perhaps the starting point that we could make, because coming to you, Marcos, first, if I could. The last 10 years have been fantastic for you guys, haven't they? You've made, in Chile, a fortune out of selling cherries to China. Those days are gone, aren't they? They're finished.
Well, yeah, as George was saying, the Chilean industry has been pretty much growing and supported mostly by cherries in the areas where we are, which is central-south regions of Chile. And the reason is China. The reason behind this is China. There's a timing of our cherries to come into this country, and it's also being a lot of commitment of the industry, trying to learn from the market and trying to find the ways to improve the supply chain into China. It's been a tremendous success. It's probably a case study around this, because everybody in the supply chain is making money, is making progress, is developing a business into China. But what are the challenges we have for the future now? I think they are big, okay? And there's definitely more opportunities in China, but we need to start taking some concrete actions and going ahead in order to keep this business sustainable in the long run.
But the big problem you have, and I don't, forgive me if I don't mean to sound rude, but kind of it's been pretty simple up to now. You've got a huge market and a kind of shortage of production that's now becoming, well, and we'll come on to this to a sec, almost perhaps too much product. And, to sell cherries into the China market in the run-up to Chinese New Year has not been the most difficult game in town, because everybody wants to buy them, and you're the only suppliers in the market at that time of year. But I know that and I remember standing in Guangzhou market in January, and I took a video, in fact, going along in a little buggy across the containers and I posted it on LinkedIn, and I had something like 20,000 views of just people who couldn't believe this. And to a certain extent, I had the feeling then that perhaps we've reached a moment of kind of perfect harmony, where the market is in perfect correlation with the production. And hearing from people then, and it's just been confirmed from George now, you've got 50% more volume coming in the next 2 or 3 years. Yeah. And how are you going to manage to market 50% more volume of cherries in that window? This year, Chinese New Year is 1 week earlier. Yeah. So
no, that's a big challenge we have to face the future, and definitely we need more markets. Okay, we have the opposite season that gives Chile into the cherry industry is a huge advantage. We have 70% of the population in the northern hemisphere, and there's not many countries in the southern hemisphere that can supply this very sensitive product, which requires very high degrees of discipline at the orchard level. These guys that are growers in the northern hemisphere, they will understand that the ways we harvest, we do the things with our cherries is different to what the US is different. The challenges, we need to travel long distances, so we need to do things different. We need to adapt it, a lot of things in order to be able to arrive with a good condition to the northern hemisphere. But then we have markets empty of cherries. The US is empty of cherries during the winter time. Europe is empty of cherries. They are asking us to ship cherries. The things that the difference in the value we are having now compared to China is too important. I don't think that is going to sustain at that level. And we definitely need to start investing more and more in those markets. Korea opened recently, a couple of years ago, and it's been a tremendous surprise for them and for us, because the Koreans were very scared. Also, how is going to be the quality out of Chile? And after a couple of years, they feel more confident. They want us to ship more. There is a protocol now in discussion to open Vietnam this coming season. And then it's Taiwan also that we have experience with. But again, Northern Hemisphere, big ones like US, Canada, Europe are pretty much empty of Chilean cherries.
But I bet, Mark, when you pick up the phone and speak to a Chilean cherry grower and shipper at that time of year and say, hey, send us some cherries, and you look at the market price that they can achieve in China versus what you're paying them in, they just say, thank you, Mark, bye.
The retailers in the US will not pay what the Chinese will pay. So, of course, that's why Chile sends everything to China, because that's the top paying market.
But at the end of the day, you need to develop markets outside China. So how are you going to, you're going to have to take the...
It requires commitment, it requires investing in those markets. And I think that that's one of the challenges that Chile industry is facing now. And because our industry is plenty of exporters, we have listed in the Association of Exporters more than 500 export companies, So to organize all of us together is a big challenge, And we definitely need, in order to promote, we need to have product. Who's going to send the product into those markets? Who's going to start developing first? Who's going to commit some volume in those markets? Is definitely one of the things, the challenges that we need to face.
And is that what you're talking about at Copy Fruit?
We are trying to invest, but it's always, at this point, a big alternative cost. So I think that requires higher degrees of collaboration in the Chilean industry in order to commit certain volume or certain percentage of our volume to start developing those markets too.
Now, Yigit, you've, in Turkey, are riding, as it were, the crest of the wave. You've seen this growth in the market in China, and Turkey comes in, and is it as simple as saying, hey, we've got cherries too, buy our cherries? Tell me some of the challenges you've faced in the China market with your cherries.
Yeah, so it was a surprising start for us too. We were expecting to start exporting to China. So on the paper, we were able to export because we could make it with cold treatment. But technically, it wasn't possible. It wasn't a treatment that can be used. So the fumigation method was just announced 3 weeks before the season ends. And all of a sudden, we had a huge demand from China. As you said, they have different expectations because we are used to work with mostly with the European customers. We also work with Hong Kong and some other Asian countries. But the consumers of China has totally different expectations.
In terms of the crunch and the taste
Crunchness,
and the color.
taste, color, exactly. So the size as well. So it also takes time for them to understand what Turkish cherry is about. We are growing one of the best cherries of the world, but it's not the same variety of the US or Chile. So I think it may take time for each parties to get used to it. But I think all of a sudden, in those 3 weeks' time, we as Turkey did a good job and introduced product to the market.
Now, Mark, over to you. If we ignore the trade policy issues just for a moment, if that's possible, but we'll come on to that in a second. What's your perspective on the challenges that Marcos and the 499 other exporters in Chile face when it comes to the China market?
The volume that they're shipping in there just blows me away. I mean, Washington is a